Okay, welcome to episode 3. This is where we reach the point of no return. I'm going to be starting cutting pieces up that came from the original remote control. So the object is to move the potentiometers from the sticks and the button that triggers the camera and the wheel that operates the camera tilt. So here are the potentiometers. One's mounted there and one's mounted there on this stick, and the other stick was the same until I started taking it apart. So here you can see this potentiometer and this potentiometer. That cable would have had to be cut anyway because it passes through a bearing. So that's 4. That's quite easy. They're just wires and they can be cut and extended. That's not too worried about that. The trigger button, on the other hand, is a little more tricky because of these tiny little ribbon cables that have to be plugged back into the original electronic board. So what I've done here is pried the original trigger button off the board to reveal these contacts, and so I'll solder extension wires onto the contacts. That'll get plugged back into the electronic board. These wires will go to the original button, the trigger on the USB handle, and that shouldn't be too difficult. Slightly more difficult is the tilt wheel for the camera. This is the original board. I've already desoldered the potentiometer for the wheel and soldered it back onto a new board which I've cut from electronic prototyping circuit board. The 3 contacts, please don't study the soldering too closely, I'm not that great, but the 3 contacts are soldered onto that board. The board is screwed back into the original housing, and these electric wires are connected back to the contacts on the potentiometer, and they'll lead out through the throttle handle and be soldered onto the original contacts from the board that I removed the potentiometer from. So let's move on with that. What's next? Threading this and cutting one of those potentiometers for the throttle, I think, is the best place to start. So I've got the cable through the handle and out through the bearing. That will go through this shaft lock piece, and that will go onto the onto the shaft, and it also fits into the now installed potentiometer for the throttle. So that will go in there, and as the throttle rotates, that'll turn the potentiometer and hopefully operate the aircraft. Bonus points is that I don't need to cut that cable, because that's going to reach the circuit board as it is. This cable had to be cut because that's obviously going all the way out to the side. This cable had to be cut because it was going through a bearing anyway, but it's going to the side as well. I'm going to have to cut that one. It's bloody close, but it's not going to reach the circuit there, so I'm going to have to cut that one. That's the potentiometer for the pitch, which is screwed onto the bracket I made earlier and fits over this little shaft. These shafts I've made out of nylon rod, which just happened to be the exact correct diameter for all of these holes in the USB stick, which is just sometimes you get lucky. I've had to turn them down a little bit in my drill to fit into the potentiometers, and then obviously file flats on each end in the correct orientation. And it turns out that the potentiometer for the yaw has been the easiest one to install. I can just put that put that shaft in there. It's nice and firm. Put the yaw pot on top of it, and then as the handle rotates, that operates the yaw. And luckily, the handle, the flat of this pot fits nicely against that internal structure of the handle, so nice and easy. Less easy is going to be this one here, down here, which is the roll axis. So that I've made a shaft there, and that will fit on there for roll. And now I just need a structure which will keep that from rotating with the roll. So anchor it to this piece inside here, so that as the the reason it's there is because obviously as the pitch is operated, that needs to travel along that axis like that. So that's all coming together well. The other thing here is I'm using the original cable from the USB stick as it comes out, and I've just wired up a little homemade plug here to go into the original socket for the potentiometer that was there. I've had to rewire this slightly because I couldn't figure out for the life of me which leads led to the trigger switch. So I've cut some of the tracks on the circuit board and just branched across to one of the leads that didn't exist already. So that now leads out to two of the pins on the socket here. So now I can just put all this back together again, and it should be good to go. Next stage after that will be building something to hold the roll pot, extend those cables, and yeah, put together the throttle handle. Alrighty, so this is where we're at. I've connected up everything I can think of to the different parts of the new systems. So starting from the left to the right, we've got the camera tilt lever, goes down, cabling through the handle and out here. That's that little grey cable there, which is connected to this breakout board I've hot glued in across here, which is then wired into the old circuit board that the controller was connected to, so that I can then use the original ribbon cable and plug straight back into the electronic board. The throttle potentiometer is connected to that. I didn't have to cut that because the length is right. You notice that the spring didn't work for the mechanism I built in here, so I'm going to redo that on the outside with some bigger springs, but that's the next stage. So that's the left stick plug ready to go in. The other three cables are connected to the breakout board and wired to extensions which go across here for the roll on this stick. Also on the breakout board is this plug here. I've got 6 connections, but at the moment I'm only using these 2, which go to the trigger, and this will be a little plug which you can see here, which is for the photo button, and that's wired into the old circuit board so that it's then connected back into the main board with the original ribbon cable. So that's the trigger. Then this cable is the right stick, which is pitch and yaw. So I think that's everything. So at this stage I can put the rest of the controller back together again, and then work on while it's complete, work on the centering return for the throttle, which I'm going to put as an addition under here rather than redesigning and rebuilding this whole palaver. At the moment I've got I'm going to stick that onto there, and I've got these 2 springs which will go something like that, so that it pulls that stick back to center. So next time you'll see it as a single unit, I hope. Then it comes down to testing and see if it actually works. Yeah, onwards and upwards.